resistance. It also goes up too, right? Remember, total peripheral resistance is really the summation of resistance of all the vessels in the circulatory system. So if one part goes up, all of it essentially goes up too. So what does that mean? So if total peripheral resistance goes up, what happens to our blood pressure? It also increases. And so what happens is with an increase in total peripheral resistance, with increase in pressure, our aorta, now that you know the word, will distend. It will stretch out, right? Greater pressure, it's going to kind of balloon out. And so, let's say peripheral. Yeah. Stretch. As you know, the increase in mean pressure stretches the aorta. Now, there are. No, that was not what I wanted. Now there are baroreceptors. There are baroreceptors in your aorta, and when they feel stretch, they will send. So these are baroreceptors. Can't spell receptor. When they feel stretch, they'll send a signal to the cardiovascular control center saying the aorta is stretched. Probably means because blood pressure increased. And so the cardiovascular system is going to say, okay, blood pressure has increased, we got to bring it down. So what are ways it's going to bring down blood pressure? Lower cardiac output. Yes, it will lower cardiac output. What else? There are other ways. Well, what parts of cardiac output can you do to reduce cardiac output? You can reduce stroke volume. You can reduce heart rate. You can also do vasodilation in other areas. But we're going to ignore this one for now. So the cardiovascular control center is going to, it has a parasympathetic response and a sympathetic response. So it is going to downregulate its sympathetic response, and it's going to upregulate its parasympathetic response. Because parasympathetic response is going to lower heart rate. Right? This is going to go to the SA node, and then tell the SA node to beat slower. That's what the parasympathetic response does in the body, remember? It tells the heart to beat slower. Now the sympathetic response, when it acts on the SA node, it tells the heart to beat faster. So by suppressing the sympathetic response and elevating our parasympathetic response, the net effect is we're going to slow the heart rate down. Now what controls stroke volume, the parasympathetic or the sympathetic, or both? Just the sympathetic. The sympathetic response, the sympathetic nervous system is innervated the myocardium. And so by inhibiting the sympathetic response, we are taking away the message of saying beat harder, basically. So there's less innervation from the sympathetic system, that stroke volume is going to go down because that myocardium in the heart is going to beat basically less hard, but less contractility. And so that's how we reduce cardiac output. A reduce in cardiac output will eventually bring down our elevated blood pressure. So that is the baroreceptor reflex. It's the idea that something changes, that increases blood pressure. That blood pressure creates stretch in our arteries. That's distension in our arteries. And then baroreceptors in our arteries, specifically in our aorta and our carotid arteries, will relay that stretch information to the cardiovascular center, and it will have autonomic responses to basically compensate. So if blood pressure went up, it wants to bring things down. And it does the vice versa too. If blood pressure drops, it is going to tell the heart to work harder to bring blood pressure back up. It will do the opposite. It can feel, baroreceptors can feel also the lack of stretch too. If it feels that the aorta is not as stretched as it should be, it will do the opposite too. And it follows the exact same pathway. Different results of the autonomic response, what is the same pathway? Yes?
So for the parasympathetic, it can't control stroke volume, but it can only control the heart rate.
Yeah.
But then the sympathetic, it can control both of them?
It can control heart rate and stroke volume, yeah.
Okay.
And so by downregulating the sympathetic response, upregulating the parasympathetic, you get less stroke volume. You get a lower stroke volume, and you get a lower heart rate too. Okay. Is there any part that didn't make any sense here? Do I need to rehash any part? The baroreceptor reflex? No. Yeah?
So how much increase of MAP to initiate this reflex?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. It depends. It depends. It's a varied response from individual to individual. There is not a certain level that I know of that kicks this response in. It's kind of complicated too because there's a lot of things that can stretch in the aorta, and how much of what you need to do to get that is pretty complicated. So I don't actually know the answer off the top of my head, and I don't know if an answer really exists for a general person. Maybe for the 70-kilogram European man there is, but I don't know for everyone else. Any questions about this? Yeah.
Does the aorta have capillaries around it?
Well, there is the vasa viscorum. So the tunica externum, the tunica externa of the aorta has its own capillaries to kind of feed the smooth muscle in the aorta. There's that, yeah. Why? Is there?
No, that was.
Is that it? Yeah. All major vessels do have capillaries because they have smooth muscle in them. So if they have smooth muscle and they have an endothelium, they need to have some blood supply.
Okay.
It's not going to come directly from the blood inside the lumen. Any other review topics? Okay, I'll see you guys next week then.
So I didn't pick anatomy.
I figured.
The